Hello everyone, in today's video I thought we'd do something a little bit different. Now this is going to be a review of this lovely PAC 750XL aircraft, but before I do that I have to actually say that this video contains a donated item. Believe it or not, if you go back a couple weeks, around New Year's, somebody said, oh, you should do a review and like a tutorial on this airplane, and I'm like, well, it's kind of expensive and I don't really have time to go learn into the airplane. So I actually reached out to the company who makes this aircraft, that's Orbx, for those of you who are not sure on that particular one. If, by the way, you're interested in this particular one, they have it up on their website right now. This is the PAC P750 XSTOL that you can go check out for those of you who are curious about it. And I said, hey, can I get a reviewer's copy? And they said, yeah, just send us a copy of any video you do afterwards. I'm like, cool. So I got a cool new plane out of it, and we'll be doing a review of this today. And then, of course, next time we'll go ahead and do a detailed tutorial and, flying it around. That one I don't have to make all those disclosures on, which is pretty cool. So what is this thing? Wow, it is interesting mix of different things. This is from the Pacific Aircraft Corporation. When they originally designed this, they were trying to design it to be a skydiving carrying airplane. And when you look at it, you kind of get a feel of like, am I a TBM? Am I a PC-12? Am I a Piper? Or am I like, one of those, Cessna 208, and it really is a combination of all of those with a big old nose on the front. So when you first climb inside this thing, it's pretty interesting. Definitely a mix of the old and new, and I'm going to go float in the back real quick. First thing we're going to check out here is, like I said, this will be a formal review, so I'm going to really kind of put it through its paces. This is the particular cargo version of this aircraft. So looking around the back side, you can see there's little places on the floor to pop the chairs in and out. You can see we have this really neatly little textured floor. I mean, it's kind of neat that, like, if I turn my head a little bit, you can see how they got that nice parallax kind of going over there, moving along with it. You have this little handle in the back. I can click that button. You can see the door opens up. So if I want to do the, oh God, what have I done? I can go ahead and hang outside the door real quick. I can close the hatch on that one directly. All the different items in here, we don't have any special things, like I can't squeeze the handle on the fire extinguisher or anything. But even the little details like down here where it talks about like the individual cargo, all this stuff has been detailed, and actually somebody must have really sat down and taken 1,000 different pictures of this plane. I love the fact that the wing box comes right through here, which is, this will be the main support for like the big heavy part of the wing right there. And it goes right through the center like that. You've got all the different attachment points all kind of set. If you float up to the top, they actually took the time to put a little strap with a little gauge here. You've got these little tiny little screws and a little bit of reflection kind of coming through. On the outside of the aircraft, again, very well detailed, up to the exact same standards that we've come to kind of get used to from Microsoft Flight Simulator. The spinner here, obviously, we're not reflecting everything around us, but it looks good. You've got this mouth, and I have to lie, and just take a look at this real quick. I love the fact that it looks like it's a mouth going, the entire time. It's got the little like mustache sticking out each side for the different air intakes and exhaust and everything. I just get kind of a little kick out of that one. I thought we have the two pilots inside. These are the default ones that I accidentally clicked the box to ages ago, and now I'm kind of stuck with it. But you can see they're chilling. All the different antennas along the top are all visible. If I zoom in, you can see the individual rivets. You got that nice, beautiful, physics-based rendering there. You can see the reflection of the rest of the aircraft. Coming out on the edge here, got this little red flashy light. It's pretty much exactly what we'd expect. Looks like it's a quick little texture change, nothing excessively kind of detailed. Poking underneath, when you look at the ailerons themselves, if I tip the ailerons up and away, and if I look behind them, a lot of times you get a little bit of rust here, but what you actually notice is, you've got the little bar here that would be rocking with this. You can see the exact position. If I push it down, it's got the appropriate gap in here. You even have a little rusty, nasty texture there. We have the little anti-static wicks kind of hanging off the edge there. I can give these a pretty little wiggle. That you're kind of just connected to the aileron here, but they do serve that purpose pretty well. You've got that little wing fence, and you got the little box popping the flaps all the way to the down position. You can see they got the little arms, do the little articulation here. If you pop them all the way up to the up position, you can see they fold appropriate with it, and everything kind of seals up right on the outside just like that, which is super impressive. Details on the landing gear are looking pretty solid as well, and again, I can't walk up to this thing and kind of play with it. Obviously, I can kick the landing gear every which way here, and the front wheel is not going to move at all on me. That's just the way it's designed, but it looks pretty good. You've got the little hydraulic lines, and obviously as you fold it back up into the plane. I love the fact that they take the time to have a little loading place where you stick the ramp up to it. Coming to the back, you have your elevator here, controls. Look at the size of that elevator. Notice if I push it as hard forward as I can, there's actually a stop on it. I can't actually push it further, even though if I keep going, I can actually get another half a travel here. Whereas if I pull back all the way, notice I have the full travel there, which is really impressive. Skin itself, obviously North Coast Aviation there, Papa 2, which I think is really neat. You got the little spot on the back where like the elevator just slips in there. Coming up to the tippy top where you got the little beacon light, bacon light as I like to call it. Again, we just have a little simple texture that just kind of alternates there, but it looks pretty solid. The aircraft is definitely not worn or torn or anything along those lines. You can kind of see how usually a lot of times, at least in the planes that I fly, there's almost always a little bit of trail right here for like, where the fuel is coming out. But if you do take a look the way the light hits the texture here, where people could be kind of scurrying across the wing, that it's got, definitely somebody's put their foot there and scuffed it up a couple of times, which is a really, really good detail. The windshield itself, you can kind of see that it's gotten a little bit of love here, which is absolutely awesome. Swinging to the inside, definitely a combination of old and new in this aircraft, which I don't hate in the slightest. The windshield, I'm not hitting the light just wrong where you can see it all being scraped up, but there's definitely glass here, and I can feel that there's glass here. One thing I get a kick out of in this is if I pull this handle back, take a look at this. It's like it's a hatch. It's like it's not so much a door. I can get in and out of it, obviously, but it's very, very different. Floating to the other side, I love how these guys have their own cockpit door as well. That all works properly. The seats on this thing, I do have to raise a quick question here. So if I take a look straight down, let me go float my head down here a little bit. Look at the position of the seats for just a half a second. And you're probably sitting here going, this isn't a problem. The seats are right there. Okay, so this is where my right leg is going to be hanging out, right? So this is about where my tummy's going to be hanging out, right? Just a little bit about here, and kind of go from there, and end up in kind of a fun little situation where my head ends up, let's call it about here in the plane. So when I took my head down, you'll notice that the headrest is down there, where like the back of my back, like the top of my back is. I think somebody needs to, whoever sat in this plane before me, they just need to tweak that. I do appreciate the fact they have the good 5-point, very, very easy to use harness here. I'm continuing to float around here. I love the fact that you have, the emergency controls down here if you need to pop open the landing gear. We don't actually have the ability to open that sucker, which is kind of bummer. I also like the fact that, you've got this little handle, fire axes inside of there and everything. Floating down here, you have this guy right here. Each version keeps track of its own different amount of flight time. Obviously, this is a little different. I usually fly the Skydiver version. But they have the centered lighting here, so if you want to fits with that a little bit, we'll go ahead and set the time of day real quick, just to kind of demonstrate what that's capable of. Go ahead and flip that one on real fast. Close that on real quick. Let's go ahead. I believe there's a separate switch for cabin lighting in here. Let's go ahead and light this place. What did I do? I hit the wrong switch. Actually, that was the correct switch. I'll turn on the cabin light. We'll turn on this one. We'll turn on the instrument lights. And we'll come down here and kind of crank these up just a little bit. Crank these up. Crank these up. Crank these up. That looks pretty good, and you can get a pretty good look at what it looks at night. I love the fact that they took the time to get like the little reflections of all the instruments up here. If I go to a different page, for example, you'll see that it's actually reflected in this reflection. It's reflected. You get my feels. So let's go ahead and set that back to the normal time of day. I can go pop off some of these switches. So again, they do a really nice job of that kind of a thing as well. Floating around too, you can see the different controls here. Obviously, the guy in the seat doesn't grab this thing very much, but it's got that nice kind of smooth texture kind of moving through. We have all these in here. These work. I can actually pull the avionics bus and you can see everything shuts down. I can stick it back in and everybody pops back on. This is separate than the actual control over on this side, which can actually, turn your avionics on and off depending on what you need here. We have lots of switches, a couple switches that don't work. We just have this kind of stress switch right here. We have the slaving system. This is always fun to play with because you can set it to free. And if you crank this, what would normally happen is you'd see this entire gyro kind of hike into one side. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. It's working. It's working. It's just a little bit chunky. If I set it to slave, it should reset. So again, you can see that that works perfectly. We have a pretty standard stack of avionics, but one thing that they added, which was a good touch, is you can actually come down here and select different types of them. We can open and close doors here. We can set our default units. I'm sticking to kilograms and liters here because why not? And I can actually go over here and press this button, and I've actually activated the GTN 750 here. Now, I've had a little bit of trouble trying to get the GTN 750 to play nice with the HSI. It's probably something on my end. And another thing I have to say is I've not been able to get the autopilot to start. And from what I have read on the forums is that has something to do with the GPS. That's this one right here. So that's probably something they're going to fix a little later on. Continuing though, you see a bunch of really cool instruments. I love the fact these instruments are like chunky. And the incredible thing is these buttons are not just for show. A lot of these actually do function. Unfortunately, those two that I just picked randomly do not. But going through the different options here, if I want to switch between pressure and temp, we have our little fuel totalizer here. We can see exactly how much fuel, what my fuel pressure is, fuel to destination, fuel reserve. Everything is here. We can get the different fuel tanks. There's a lot of fuel tanks on this thing. We can check them all individually, and all the lights will dynamically change. So like, if I come up here, for example, and let's say I want to fill this up with gas, you can see now I'm up in the green layers here. If I want to reach into there real fast and absolutely lower this thing, you can actually watch it dynamically boom, see how the red lights come on, and you can see that it does a very careful job balancing it. It flashes at you, and all those little details are completely closed. There's also one up here that'll actually tell you if you're in the icing zone. You have your ELT on this side. You have an altitude device. You have your thing for as far as voltage and stuff like that goes. Apparently, we're having a bit of a discharge. Actually, no, never mind. I was just checking to make sure I wasn't messing up here. But we can come in here. We can set our altitude alarm if we want to do it. It ties in with the automatic pilot and everything like that. One thing I have not finished, and it's incompetence on my part, is I haven't figured out how to shut that screen off. Not that it matters, but, it's there. It just kind of distracts me. And I will stick to this. We also have a couple stress buttons in here. I can change my music channel, but unfortunately, I have no music to play. So as cool as that is, it's relaxing as far as I know. And of course, you have the classic LS Tech here. Everything else is detailed smooth. We're looking right along the side here real quick. You can see that we have a nice three-dimensional gauges for this, and they bounce around. This HSI is fantastic. I love the fact you can change GPS mode here. You can change the details of the map, turn the traffic, the weather. I didn't think I could get to work. A couple different buttons. We can zoom in and out, which is absolutely wild. And this is a really neat unit. I've not played with this one. We have the ability to change our attitude right here, which unfortunately, if I pull that out, that should lie. Okay, yeah, it sticks it exactly the way I wanted. So enough talk. I think I've said enough about the way this plane looks. Let's take a look at how it listens, because you can look at sounds. So a very comprehensive sound suite and that kind of a thing. It sounds, again, I don't have one of these in my backyard, so I can't tell you exactly what it sounds like. But enough chat about the sound and the look. Let's take this thing for a short little flight here. Obviously, we're in New Zealand. We're going to be flying over to Hamilton, heading basically west. And I'm just kind of enjoying the flight, kind of getting a feel for the way everything sort of handles. Now, this is a very, very short takeoff and landing aircraft. It's relatively straightforward, and I read through the POH. The documentation they give you is basically a PDF. It's relatively long, kind of going into some of the details and general suggestions kind of here and there for the aircraft itself. But let's do it the way we do it. So let's make sure I've got my flap set, which I do. Let's go ahead and pop this thing up to just about the peak of torque. It's going to be about 54. And it's going to be pretty good right there. We'll release. And we shouldn't need a lot of runway here. They want us to lift the nose at about 60 knots is what the book says. Definitely not a 750 XSTOL, not the XSTOL, the CH 750. That's the one I'm referring to. There we go. Ups and A's. All right, we'll go and give it a moment. I'm going to climb rate initially of about 900 feet per minute. I'll go ahead and bring up that flaps. I expect this thing to get a little sinky. And it gets a little sinky. And the book talks about roughly about 94, 95, 96, right in there, depending on weight, of course. One thing I notice right away is I've got pretty much 2-knot winds right now, and it's a bit of a bouncy plane. I don't know if I want to bounce a bunch of things. It could also do with the new beta coming from Flight on Microsoft here. I want to back down the RPM just a little bit to get it into the green range here, and I'm just going to make sure all my needles in the correct direction. Now, it might look like we have a turbulence here, but that just seems to kind of be the way this aircraft likes to kind of cut through the air. And again, it's a relatively warm day, so we could be getting those sneaky updrafts to make things interesting for us. Definitely not the highest wing loading airplane I've ever flown. So we're going to go ahead and hold that nose up and take a nice turn. So at our VY speed, you can see our nose is up pretty substantially. I'm actually not at full torque at the moment. Full torque for us is about 54, like I said. We're about hovering at 50 here. It's another PT6 engine, so it'll tolerate pretty much any shenanigan I want to throw at it right here. Getting bounced all over the place here, and this is kind of the quirk of, like I said, my flight sim here. And we'll go ahead and apply, whoa, looks like I'm trying to kill us here. But this aircraft just is very, very light in turbulence. It's and what I would call a very stiff ride. You know, it can ride the turbulence, it can ride the waves. It's just it's going to bounce you around quite a bit when it does so. Now, just like a real turboprop, I noticed that my torque is decreasing. I noticed that my temperatures are going to slowly start rising on account of the fact that, you know, the air gets a little bit thinner. We don't get quite the same performance. I'm going to go ahead and tap that throttle up just a tiny bit. Again, just trying to get a feel for the way it behaves here. Whoa, like I said, it's always got this kind of wandering thing going on here, and I just have the default for high clouds. Whoa. Not 100% sure if that's a flight model or flight sim, so it really could be either in that regard. I'm just going to kind of be careful here. Yeah, it looks pretty good. All right, 54. Oh! Easy, guys, easy. Like, no joke, I'm not doing that with the controls. You can see I'm holding the controls basically centered at this point. All right, so we're going to sneak up to about 3,000 feet here, which should be a pretty good altitude. I'm just going to kind of let it fly through the bumps here. A little bit higher. Whoa. Like I said, it's a little sensitive in the air. A little sensitive. Very stiff. Kind of reminds me of flying like a Piper Archer in the summer. Just, you know, you're going to feel it all. You're going to feel it all. All right, that feels pretty good. Yeah, it's about 3,000 feet. Let's go ahead and push that nose down. You'd think I'd be stalling every couple seconds. There we are. We'll go ahead and level this off. Normally, we go ahead and engage the autopilot, but like I said, I was having some difficulty getting the autopilot to engage. I was going through the manual on this one, and it describes the function of the autopilot beautifully. Unfortunately, what they do is they don't have a quick button for it. It's not like an AP engage, but what I did find, and like I said, you have an autopilot master switch. When you hit that switch, it just sort of beeps at you. And there's no automatic pilots. Of course, what we could do is we come over here. We could hit the alt mode. We could hit the nav mode. And let's see if that locks onto things here. I think I have just figured it out. Well, it turns out I'm just a noob. All right. Let's go ahead and snap this around. I'm going to go snap. Like I said, we're heading roughly westerly direction. Who knew? So one of the things I had done before this review, and full disclosure here, was the fact that I did uninstall the old one. And that just did seem to make the difference. That did seem to make the difference. So we're going to bring us about a 240 here, which looks pretty good. Press heading hold, and then we can start stressing about some of the other things during our flight here. So one of the interesting things is with the documentation that like I said, very, very good documentation. I'll actually call that up in just a minute so you can kind of get a thing. We have a user guide as well as sort of this quick reference sheet that you get with it. Let me go ahead and call up the user guide real quick so you can kind of see some of the documentation that you're going to get along with this one. All right, I'll give it just a half a second to kind of load in here. Unfortunately, I have the old version of Adobe. One of these days, I'll get kind of the newer one. So I don't have quite the same lag time. I'm so excited. I fixed the autopilot. This is great. Again, newbie mistake on my part. So coming in here, this is the book that they give you. It's pretty slick. We've got about 42 pages, and you can see it goes through a lot of details of the different variations. It talks about the different hatches. You have all your typical, kind of warnings in here. And this is the thing that I thought was actually kind of interesting. So when you screw through this, let me go find procedures. Detailed percent, instrument, clear of obstacles. Here we are. Climb performance, cruise performance. They recommend, and I love this. Let's see if we can. Here we go. 85% in 1870. That's just cool. So 85%. So we're going to do always set this first. Let's see here. Do about 45 torque here. I'm actually, since I've done enough experience with turboprops, I know this number is going to come up. And this number needs to be 1,870. Now, I just find that such an interesting combination. Like, I've flown a couple different aircraft over the years. Very rarely are things like not an even number. And it's modeled correctly. That's with the actual good folks over at PAC. Notice, by the way, my torque came up as my RPM came down. Makes perfect sense. We are within limits as far as ITT. NGG was NGG, whatever that is. Perfect. Oil temperature and pressure is totally legal. And of course, coming over here, now we can float around and see some of the other functionality of this aircraft as I'm kind of cruising now. One thing we see is I love the fact this is in liters. It's a very interesting combination of fuel tanks on this one. And I can go to the right, I can go to the left side. Again, this should be a little unbalanced, nothing terrible there. We have the left one, of course we have the right one, which is going to be way out of balance here. And you're going to see a lot of that during this flight. Now the fuel system, which I thought was really wild, is usually when we think about fuel, we have like the left-right switch on this one, but this one doesn't. You have a push on and a pull off option. Another thing you have is if you come over here, you have an automatic fuel management system on this side that gives you the ability to basically turn that on and off dynamically depending on what you're trying to achieve. I guess at this point we can shut off that light for the landing. Boop, go ahead and pop that one off. Cool. So I thought that was very interesting. Another thing I found very interesting, again, floating around, now that I got this to behave finally, So I'm shaking my head for being such a noob. But you can see that all these little things are detailed well. So like if I want to come in here and, I can go sit through here. I've got about 60 liters left. 31 liters is how much I've used already. Wow. We have 6 hours and 54 minutes. That's plenty. And of course, if I want to check to make sure my fuel pressure is correct, that's all modeled. And like I said, I'm very respectful of them for really taking the time to take all this instrumentation, which makes things very, very interesting for us, and actually taking the time to kind of model all of them. So props to them. I mean, if I want to come over here and I hit the light switch, everything comes on. And like I said, it's pretty darn cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to a landing and see if we can land just as short as they claim. All right, let's do this. Now, I should be able to push that button. Hey, I'm so excited I got the autopilot fixed. Turns out it was the GPS all along. All right, so we're going to go ahead and land this thing. Now, this aircraft markets itself on the ability to land in very, 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 very short distances. Now, I'm very interested to find out what is meant by that. Again, I'm not touching the stick. There's just something about the way this thing eats turbulence. Probably something Microsoft introduced a version or two ago. So what we're going to do is we have ourselves a nice little runway there, and we're just basically going to stick ourselves and try to use the minimum amount of distance possible. Now, the thing I love about turboprop engines is you can reverse the blades typically, and when I cut the power, the blades tend to go so coarse that it basically acts as a giant front-mounted speed brake, which will give us the ability to kind of slow down real quickly here. Now, I was looking at the quick reference handbook here, and I'll go ahead and call that up again so everybody can take a quick look. And I should be watching the plane fly, but that's okay. So we're looking at a distance of about 2,075 feet. That's a pretty hefty amount of distance. Now, the way we can visualize this a little differently. The distance between the end of this runway here and this box right here is 1,000 feet. So ideally, if we're dealing 50 feet down to 0 feet, we should have to suck up 2 of those. So basically this block right here, if we were including the 50 feet. But what I'm going to attempt to do is I'll put this thing on the ground as a short distance as I possibly can. So let's go ahead and I'll pop the flaps down. Haha, nice and meaty. Make sure I'm in high RPM here. I'm just going to let the aircraft slow down to basically nothing. Whoa, getting bounced around in that turbulence still. I wonder if I change it to a different kind. I wonder if I can slip. Let's find out. So I'm going to slip a multi-million-dollar aircraft. Yeah, it seems safe. There we go. It's got us to about minimum speed there. I like that. All right, that's about 75 knots, about 60 knots. All right, going to give it just a couple. Again, we're going for minimum landing here. Minimum landing, minimum landing. Warning. That's pretty impressive. Wow. Yeah, I can't land a 172 in that distance. That's pretty impressive. But yeah, that's about between a little less than 1,000 feet. So definitely a very, very short landing plane. They were not kidding on that one. So let's go ahead and taxi us off the runway here and kind of talk about it. So like I said, this was designed to be a review. I'll kind of take it for a little spin, see what it's like. A couple non-standard procedures. I'm still learning how to fly this plane myself, so there's definitely some things with it. In general, like I said, this is neat. I'm not 100% sure why it's weird in turbulence. I think that's something to do with the current version of Microsoft. I do have the beta version, so every once in a while they mess things up a little bit. The aircraft itself, it's well modeled. The sound of the suite is very good. It's easy to navigate. Now that I got the autopilot working, it's even better. It's very responsive. I feel like I can take it in and out of all sorts of nastiness as far as, grass versus, tarmac and things like that. Price point wise, it's about $40 US. I think that works out to be something like 25 or 26 bucks US. I'm sorry, not US. AUD, it's 38 bucks right this current time. US, it's about, I think, like I said, about 26 or $28, something like that, which is really good. It's definitely on par with many of the other aircraft that you can get on the Microsoft Marketplace right now. So I think from that sense, it's good. This is definitely the kind of plane that if you do a lot of kind of short trips or you do a lot of bush flying, this makes perfect sense as far as, pretty good choice as far as the different choices you have out there. If you want me to compare it to another aircraft, it reminds me a lot of the Cessna 208, but it's kind of maneuverable, so it's almost like the PC-6. It just has a much higher top speed, or safe speed, I should say. It's like I said, its short takeoff is pretty good, its landing is pretty good, and its capacity is very high. One thing I will share before we end the video, though, is the fact that when you get the aircraft, you have a bunch of different options, and I think it's actually pretty slick. There's the cargo version, the agriculture version, which has this neat little for aerial top dressing. I had to look up what that is. It's crop dusting. You have the passenger version, of course. You have the cool skydive version, which has a little jump light and everything like that. Other than that, like I said, a pretty neat thing. Thanks to Orbx for sending me this reviewer's copy, and we'll have a video kind of going over some of the quirks of the aircraft a little later on. Enjoy.